Hello guys, gals, and fellow VEDS-ies, and welcome to the first Freeform Friday of this year of VEDS. Today I'm presenting to you a unfinished episode from a video series I tried to do a while back entitled From Screen to Stage. For those who don't know, and believe me, I don't blame you if you don't, From Screen to Stage was going to be a series of videos comparing stage adaptations of movies to their film counterparts, with the goal of determining which one was quote-unquote better, subjectively speaking of course. This episode, focused on the Mel Brooks comedy classic The Producers, was sitting on the backlog for almost over a year now, completely unfinished. I'm not quite sure what the reason was for why I never finished this back then, but I still think there's some good stuff here, which is why I'm releasing the video now. So that's about it. Please do enjoy the following video. Hey guys and gals! Welcome back to another episode of From Screen to Stage. Springtime for Hitler, Prisoners of Love, and I Wanna Be a Producer. These three tunes have become synonymous with the subject of today's episode, Mel Brooks' masterpiece of both cinema and musical history, The Producers. The Producers, originally titled Springtime for Hitler, is a 1967 comedy written and directed by then-newcomer Mel Brooks. Starring Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder as Max Bialystock and Leo Bloom respectively, the film's about the unlikely meeting of Bialystock and Bloom, who hatch a plot to make more money with a Broadway flop than with a hit. Along their journey, they meet a deranged ex-Nazi, a flamboyant director and his assistant, a Swedish bombshell, the list goes on. Upon release in 1967, the movie won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay, and since then has been placed on AFI's Top 100 Laughs list, been reserved in the National Film Registry, and, you guessed it, became a Broadway musical. Now the musicalized version of The Producers opened on April 19th of 2001, and starred Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick as Bialystock and Bloom respectively. The musical did make slight changes to the source material, but we'll get into those things later. At the Tony Awards that year, The Producers swept the show, breaking the record previously held for 37 years by Hello Dolly, winning 12 categories total, including Best Musical. Throughout its 6-year run, many stars have graced the stage, replacing Lane and Broderick, including Tony Danza, Richard Kind, Jason Alexander, Martin Short, and Jesse Tyler Ferguson. By the end of its run, The Producers had made roughly $290 million, and even got a film adaptation in 2005, returning Lane and Broderick to the starring roles. But which is the definitive version of The Producers? The 1967 film, or the Broadway musical? Let's find out. Both film and musical versions of The Producers share essentially the same plot, obviously. However, the two versions do differ with certain story elements. For starters, the musical has Max and Leo seeking to gain $2 million from their scheme, whereas in the original film, it was only $1 million. Next, in the 1967 film, during the casting sequence, the hippie character LSD was introduced, and was subsequently cast as Hitler. However, the musical version changed this by casting Franz Liebkin, the writer of the musical, as Hitler initially, but after a freak accident, everybody decides that he can't go on. Max, out of desperation, convinces Roger Debris, the director, to take Franz's place instead, and the show goes on, basically eliminating the LSD character. Certain things were also added to the musical that weren't in the original film. The Siegfried Oath, Ula being Leo's love interest, and tension between the two leads, just to name a few. That tension stemmed from Max after getting arrested by the cops, finding out that Leo fled to Rio with and has married Ula. The tension is ultimately resolved when Leo comes to Max's aid in the courtroom scene to plea on his own behalf. But perhaps the change that splits opinion down the middle, which is also the deciding factor of this round, is the musical's happier ending. For those unaware, the original film ended with Bialystok, Bloom, and Liebkin being sentenced to 2 years in prison for blowing up the theater that Springtime for Hitler ran in. There we find all three characters essentially doing what got them into prison in the first place. The musical shares a similar ending, but goes a few steps further, having the characters granted a full pardon by the governor, then showing us that Bialystok and Bloom became extremely successful, producing many of the shows. So ultimately, which version told the better story? Well, while the movie story was good, there were things that you'd think were missing. Some scenes just start or end abruptly, with little to no build-up. Heck, the movie just starts with the Hold Me Touch Me scene, without establishing setting or tone or anything. The changes made for the musical added so much for me that going back to the original film prior to this episode, I found myself wishing that certain scenes were present. And that's what it all boils down to. The musical told a better, more complete story from overture to curtain call. And for that, the musical gets the point. Most of the major sets to the musical share a common look. 1 or 2 walls, a door, and a window. Whether it be Bialystok and Bloom's office, Roger Dupree's apartment, the facade to the theater, so on and so forth. Sure, there are exceptions, but those are reserved primarily for the big show-stopping numbers, like Springtime for Hitler and such. This design mindset isn't terrible per se, but it does leave me slightly wanting a bit more at times. Now the movie, on the other hand, does have one major drawback, for me at least. It's blatantly obvious, especially during the exterior scenes, when this was shot. From the cars to the ways people are dressed, it's clear that this was filmed during the late 60s, early 70s. It doesn't help things when the movie has scenes of Ula dancing to this music, and the aforementioned LSD musical number.
Giving pretty flowers to the people that we meet.
But when push comes to shove, even though it may be dated, I have to give the point to the movie here. Not only did it lay the groundwork, what the musical would eventually look like, but certain sets are more subtle in the film. So it's for that reason that the film gets the point. First, let's start with the playwright of Springtime for Hitler, Franz Liebkin. In the musical, Franz is definitely played up more for laughs. Now there's nothing wrong with that, as it's entertaining, and depending on the actor who plays Franz, he's arguably the funniest part of the show. However, let's remember what his character is. A deranged ex-Nazi. Now I have a hard time believing that the Nazi Party during World War II, which was notorious for being strict and stern, would allow this clown to be in their army. The movie's portrayal, while still having silly moments, also had serious ones as well. And let's be flat out perfectly honest with ourselves. Who honestly thinks that any actor can compare to Kenneth Mars in this role? Mars's portrayal was perfection at its best. Now let's move on to Ula, the Swedish dancing bombshell, where sadly, there simply isn't any comparison between musical and film. I say this because the character served two different purposes in both tellings of the story. In the musical, Ula's Leo's love interest. She was free-thinking, strong, and independent. She wasn't the blonde Swedish bimbo like she was in the original film. I needn't go any further discussing Ula's character, as the film has Bialystok describe it perfectly.
relax. What are you doing?
I'm gonna buy myself a toy. I worked very, very hard, and I think I deserve a toy.
A toy?
A toy.
The musical's Ula is better for the sole reason that she was actually a character and not just a toy. Finally, we have arguably the two most entertaining characters of both film and musical, Carmen Gia and Roger Debris. For these two characters, my opinions are kind of the opposite of that of Franz. In the film, Roger and Carmen are played, for lack of a better word, straight. They're not played too much for laughs or anything like that. They're just another strange pair of characters that Bialystok and Bloom come across. As a result, they're not as memorable as they should be. However, if you were to take those characters, toss them in a blender full of sugar and Red Bull for about 30 seconds, you'd still only have half the craziness that the musical characters have. Roger and Carmen in the musical are without a doubt the most memorable aspect of this show. Where the film had, in my opinion, a lack of chemistry between the two characters, the musical added it, and then some. It's clear that both Roger and Carmen are in a happy, loving relationship, which was a tad hard to see in the film. While some may argue that they're sometimes a bit too over the top, even for Mel Brooks, I'd argue that the show is already silly and crazy, so Roger and Carmen scenes are simply the icing of the absurdity cake. So while the film may have had the better Franz, the musical had the better Ula, Roger, and Carmen, and for that, the musical gets the point. Well, that was pretty much it, unfortunately. If you liked what you saw and would like to see the episode completed in the future, do let me know in the comments, and until next time, guys, gals, and fellow VEDS-ies, I will see you tomorrow. Bye.